First, I'm going to start with the question to the audience. How many of you run stateful applications in your OpenShift? So like databases, VMs? Raise your hand. OK, perfect. How many of you have a plan already running some sort of DR or data protection on your OpenShift today? If you do, raise your hand. OK, if you did raise your hand, you're definitely in the right place. We're gonna talk about the DR strategies and data protection for OpenShift, in particular with the OpenShift virtualizations. There was already introductions for our panelists. These are the best experts you can find in the area here. They bring a lot of depth of knowledge, and hopefully you enjoy it. And the first question is for Andy and Brenda, okay? So as you might know, Kubernetes traditionally has been a platform for the stateless application, ephemeral workloads, right? And we've seen a big shift in everything evolves around the stateful applications, again, around virtual machines are super popular and databases. So with this change, why do you think a backup and disaster recovery have become such critical topics? And with that also in mind, what's driving the demand? Like, what do you think is causing the market to heat up so much? So Andy, why don't we start with you first?
Sure. So first of all, nice to meet everyone. I've been fortunate to be in this industry since about 2016, 2017, and really seen the evolution of Kubernetes since then. And as people started playing with Kubernetes in 2017, it was really stateless. It was, hey, this is a cool platform. I can play with it. I can use it for dev test. I can use it for testing new ideas in the lab. But it wasn't really at that time for state. But dial forward to about maybe 2020, 2021, and people started saying, wait a second, this platform, this layer is really powerful for me to run workloads, have them portable, have them scalable, have them carry the performance I need. And so we started seeing companies invest in stateful workloads, putting mission critical state onto Kubernetes. And with that shift, of course, came a set of requirements they had to meet, SLAs they had to meet, things like backup, things like DR, things like networking, all the things that you need for a mission critical application to actually run on Kubernetes now are on the checklist for enterprises as they put state into production.
Brenda, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, so I think that with the huge disruption to the industry with virtual machines with the Broadcom purchase, a lot of companies are looking for a different hypervisor, right? And so with that, of course, Red Hat has seen that influx in OpenShift virtualization. So it's great to be able to run the VMs alongside of the containers, but it also has significantly increased in the amount of persistent data that has to be protected. And so I think if you look at the traditional backup and restore methods that are out there, they're not really cloud native, and thus the need for some of our partners that are here today.
Oh, perfect. Great answer. Thank you. So Brenda, oh, you want to add something?
No.
No? So we're going to stay with you, Brenda and Andy, for the next question. So when it comes to disaster recovery, there's like tons of strategies that the customer can apply, right? There's a metro DR, regional DR. How do you guide, maybe first explain what these are to the audience, and then tell us what are the best implementations and approaches for the customers to go with. And then if you have any customers that you worked with that had the problem of protecting the persistent data, can you give us some story from where you experienced firsthand helping them get to the resolutions with that problem? So Brenda, maybe we were going to start with you first.
Yeah, so I think if you look at metro DR and regional DR for your HA, and resiliency, you have to look at backup for your for data protection. When you're looking at what solution you're going to go with, you have to start with what's the criticality of the application. If you have a highly critical app that has a very low RTO, the recovery time objective, or the RPO, the recovery point objective, right? How much data can you lose, and how quickly can I get that back into a working state? Those are going to be some major factors that are going to help decide Do I go metro, which is going to be synchronous replication, versus regional DR, which is going to be your asynchronous replication? But you also have to take distance limitations into account, right? You have to have really low latency, less than 10 milliseconds. For your synchronous replication. Otherwise, your applications aren't going to be able to sustain the performance if you go much higher than that. And as you're deciding to go which way for your applications, those that are active, or like I said, the low RPO and RTO, you really need to look at Metro DR. The regional DR, it takes that distance limitation away, it takes away the latency, and it's obviously more cost effective, right? But through all of it, don't forget that you need to do backup to be able to protect from like bugs and defects, from configuration issues, ransomware, human error. As well, and that you can't just be backing up the persistent data. With it being in the Kubernetes environment, you also need to make sure that you're backing up the metadata and all the other like services and routes and like all that comes with Kubernetes. What do you got, Andy?
Yeah. And you touched on the criticality of the application, and I like to think of it through the business lens. And I'll take a couple of customer examples. So we have a banking customer, and they had a specific banking app that they wanted to put on Kubernetes on OpenShift and put it in production. But as you can imagine, if that banking app goes down for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the fines they receive, the impact it has to a customer, the downtime is too big for them to swallow. And so for that use case, Metro DR, or Sync DR, as we'll refer to it, often is the thing that they had to do. They had to architect Sync DR into the solution to make Kubernetes work for them. Another customer, a car company, they're using Kubernetes on the factory floor. So imagine a factory floor where if the factory stops for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, that means cars that aren't rolling off the production line. That means cars that are no longer making revenue for the company. That's the type of application that requires that Metro DR, that Sync DR. On the flip side, maybe you're a restaurant, right? Maybe you've got a web-facing app that's for customers to put orders in. Yes, it would be less than ideal for that app to go down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes when you're taking orders, but it's not going to have the financial impact of a factory floor or a banking app. That might be a better case for regional DR. So what we see is a lot of customers tier it based on what is the actual business impact that application is going to have.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thanks so much. And we're going to stay on the customer use case here. I also want to let you guys know we're going to keep the 10 minutes at the very end for the questions. So as we're going through the answers with our panelists, start formulating the questions in your head, and we're going to have a chance to have you present. But the next question goes to, we're going to leave you alone a little bit. Now Matt and Rodolfo, the next one is for you, right? So now with all those stateful workloads like databases and VMs that we discussed that are part of the Kubernetes landscape, what type of disasters are you seeing organizations face? And what kind of protections and strategies are essentials to mitigate these?
So great question, Chris. Yeah, sorry, Rodolfo, hopefully I can go first. I guess I have the mic. So.
Yeah, perfect.
But yeah, so absolutely, disaster recovery, backup, those necessities have not gone away with Kubernetes, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this room talking about it. I think Brenda touched upon it perfectly earlier, too, in terms of highlighting the difference between disaster recovery and backup and how those are different and how they can serve different purposes. I think in terms of what we're seeing, it's kind of what you'd expect. So taking Kubernetes out of it, if you lose a fiber connection to your main data center, that application is offline. Or it could be, transient failure because of a misconfiguration, things like that. Being able to quickly recover either to a different site or within the same site is incredibly important, but also very much enabled by the architecture of Kubernetes. So definitely something that we can take advantage of, and we want to look at, we mentioned persistent data on the cluster. We also may have persistent data that's not actually on the Kubernetes cluster, maybe outside, but we still want to protect the application as a whole, right? So we've got our metadata, we've got maybe our pods that are referencing a database that's in a VM or maybe in the cloud. Being able to protect that as a granular unit is very important. Just to ensure business continuity, that we don't have these major outages that Andy had mentioned, where it's costing potentially millions of dollars every minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Rodolfo, you have anything else to add? Any insights from your end?
Yes, I have a lot of conversations with prospects and customers, and many times it comes to the replication is not backup. Okay, I always say replication is wonderful, but one day you will have to restore from a backup, either by what Brenda said about an OpenShift bug, an application bug, a human error. I ran this Ansible playbook with the wrong scope and I broke something. And I don't know how to fix it, but it was broken in both sides, okay? So replication for disaster recovery, almost zero RTO and zero RPO is great. That's what we want. It can be more expensive, but maybe our application needs that. We need very little downtime, okay? But one day you will need to recover from a backup, okay? And for that you need cloud-native tools for the new environments, okay? That can understand Kubernetes platforms. I haven't seen yet 2 customers using Kubernetes or OpenShift the same way. Okay, so we use tools. We're tools that allow you to, we give you flexibility to do what you like. What are the protections? You can do what you want. Okay, you can use the OpenShift console, you can use our consoles, you can use automation, integration with the Red Hat ecosystem. So what are you more comfortable with? I would say that's the key thing, and remove complexity, make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I want you to keep the microphone, Rodolfo, because the next one is designed specifically for you. I know you have a great experience around not just the OpenShift, but also you did a lot of work with the OpenStack and maybe more VM-centric environments, right? Mm-hmm. So how does the approach to backup and disaster recovery evolve when you move from hypervisor-based virtualization into running VMs on Kubernetes, right? Like with something like OpenShift virtualization. What's changed, and why is backup and DR still so critical in this new setup?
Oh, backup and DR, we all know why it's so critical. Okay, now in my company, we've been doing OpenStack backup and disaster recovery for many years. On the one side, in Kubernetes and OpenShift is not that different. Okay, the KubeBuild project allows us to use KVM-based VMs, and on that side, it's not that different. On the other hand, we can run VMs and containers all together, and that adds a layer of complexity. We can have multi-cloud environments, hybrid clusters. So it's a little different. It's a little more challenging. Okay, so you need, again, cloud-native tools that can understand those environments and be able to protect those VMs, including data, metadata, images, or if you are running applications, it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter how you deploy your applications. The data protection tools should be able to understand how you are deploying your application, be it a deployment, GitOps, operators, Helm charts, VMs, whatever. But I would like to put the focus for everyone. We should understand that clusters are fungible, okay, and the main focus of data protection should be applications and VMs, okay. A cluster, you can redeploy it on-prem or in the cloud quite easily, okay. But applications, that's the key component of your whole architecture, okay, and you should be able to restore it with lots of flexibility anywhere, okay. OpenShift anywhere. Your application anywhere, your cloud-native data protection should run anywhere, okay? So.
Perfect. Oh, you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention you. So obviously, our company bread and butter was vSphere, right? So VMs, traditional infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and it's definitely, to Rodolfo's point, in terms of having to almost change the mindset around what we're protecting from infrastructure-centric versus application-centric, right? But that also applies for OpenShift Vert VMs, we'll talk about in a second. But worth noting that a lot of organizations, enterprises that are just getting started with Kubernetes think that they can just back up their worker nodes and call it a day, right? Because if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I've got VM backup, my worker nodes are in VMs, why can't I just back those up? I think most of us, hopefully in this room, know that that's not the case, right? So second to second, things can vary in the cluster. Rodolfo touched on a really good point of it's almost like this is the height of commoditization of infrastructure, right? We treat the clusters as ephemeral, so we need to make sure that we can recover those applications that we care about. We don't care about recovering the actual cluster. So it's one thing we hear a lot as a vendor is, I'll just back up etcd, which is like, yeah, that's a click deeper. You understand Kubernetes and that etcd is the underlying configuration, but that is effectively the same thing as backing up your VMs that are running your worker nodes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So actually, I want you to keep the mic because I think the next one you might be good together with Andy, good people to respond to it. So we're going to shift a little bit into hybrid clouds or multi-clouds, right? So we meet with a lot of customers, and that model is on everyone's mind these days. So what strategies should end user consider to ensure seamless data protection and disaster recovery across these different environments, especially with working with OpenShift, right? How can they best manage consistency and reliability across these clouds?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and I think this is probably very much top of mind for a lot of our VM compatriots as a direct result of the recent Broadcom thing, right? You look at vendor lock-in and the risks there. So I think this is all kind of top of mind. Add on to that with a lot of the hyperscalers, as great as they are, in terms of flexibility, you still risk getting locked in with, if you're using their backup solution. I'm not going to say anybody's name, but maybe I'm using a specific backup solution for the hyperscaler I'm on. That's great, but if I want to recover to a different hyperscaler on premises, suddenly, you're paying egress costs and you're converting to QCal2 or whatever. So these are all things that we need to consider. And the beautiful thing about Kubernetes is the standardization, the framework, right? So we have, hopefully most of the room have heard about CSI, the container storage interface. That has been incredibly helpful, I think for all of us in the room here, in terms of having a standardized way to protect these Kubernetes persistent data workloads. So really kind of focusing on solutions that are application-centric, not infrastructure-centric, and that can work across both on-premises and public clouds. And yeah, I think, end of day, we want to make sure we have that flexibility. We're promised this beautiful thing of the cloud. It's easy to get in. It's also a little bit like Hotel California. Once you check in, you can't check out. So being able to have the tools with you to be able to check out is incredibly important.
Yeah. Andy, I know Portworx is very popular among our customers with the hybrid cloud. Do you have anything else to add?
No, just an extension of what you said, right? The app centricity in everything you do from a storage perspective, from a DR perspective, from a backup perspective matters incredibly, because when you take that app-centric approach, suddenly you can decouple from everything else underneath. You can abstract away from everything else underneath. And so you can get to an app awareness or a container granularity that says, today I'm backing it up on AWS, tomorrow I'm backing it up on Google, the next day I'm pulling it back on-prem. And that's powerful. So abstracting away the underlying storage, abstracting away the underlying complexity, lets you take advantage of OpenShift the way it was meant to be, which is run that app anywhere, back it up anywhere, protect it anywhere. And so the storage, the data, the DR solutions have to be able to go along with that message, or you're going to be stuck, as Matt said, where your array is or where your data protection is, not where you want your application to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's move on to another aspect of the data protection. So, Matt, and this one is especially for you. I know you have a bit deep expertise. So, data protection goes beyond just the recovery. It's also about meeting compliance, right? And security, compliance and security requirements. How do you see customers navigating regulations like GDPR or HIPAA? Particularly when migrating Kubernetes clusters on OpenShift. What tools of strategies should they consider to ensure compliance during these migrations?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I'll not pick on, but a great example is our compatriots in the federal government, right? So the gold standard, if you are, especially on the high side, the defense side, is to have what's called continuous ATO, or continuous authority to operate. But it's a very difficult thing to achieve because you have to essentially have real-time compliance controls. You have to be able to report immediately. You have to be able to demonstrate that you can meet the SLAs that you've committed to. And I'll go back to kind of this. If I had one thesis for the day, is Kubernetes very much helps enable that, right? Through the platform, through the orchestration, as well as through the standardization. Obviously Red Hat, the core solutions like RHAX, ACS is a great way to start. We actually, and I know I have a number of customers that are using that, both for monitoring their backup infrastructure, but also their application infrastructure. That's a great start. Using things like Open Policy Agent, or using something like Kyverno policies with your OpenShift cluster. again, it's standardized, right? We've got YAML. We can set these policies as code and ensure that we enforce that on our cluster to ensure that we're always within compliance. So it's a really interesting time. I think, it's difficult because there is so much to cover when you look at Kubernetes, but it's also a beautiful thing in that you can do so many things flexibly, and you can leverage automation and GitOps. You can remove human error as well. Beyond that, I think also, zero trust, that's, I throw an industry buzzword, but that's something that can also be not easily achieved, but Kubernetes can absolutely help facilitate, using things native to Kubernetes, like cluster role bindings and role bindings, and using short-lived keys, right? I've got a couple colleagues in here that will laugh because I shared it was for a demo environment, but I shared a long-lived key in Slack, that's a big no-no. So anyways, yeah, a lot to consider here. I think it's important to understand that disaster recovery and backup do fall under compliance and security, right? That's a core thing if you're a government entity, if you're a bank, to your point earlier, demonstrating that, yes, I'm compliant with HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, if you're federal government, banking, or FIPS if you're federal government. So a lot to consider, a lot of tools out there, definitely ACS, ACM, great place to start.
Yeah, thanks. And speaking of the interesting times, I think the last questions I would like contributions from each of you, because I know everyone has their own vision. So I'd love to hear what future trends do you see shaping the landscapes of the data protection and disaster recovery, especially in context of the Kubernetes and OpenShift? Where do you think the industry is headed, and what should organizations be preparing for? And maybe we can start with Brenda this time.
So I'm going to go off topic just a little bit. I think that you're going to see some shifts or some changes, some enhancements to the container storage interface, right? The CSI drivers. I think you're going to see some more introduction to fiber channel CSI drivers, maybe NVMe over TCP. I think you'll also see enhancements for scalability and performance under load for the CSI drivers. And then I think you'll also get to the point where there's going to be like a tighter integration for disaster and recovery whenever you're using those external storage arrays. So I think that that's going to be a future trend as well. And then sticking on the subject of security, within the CSI drivers, I think there's going to be like limitations put on the CSI drivers for the access to the storage arrays. Like there'll be role-based access, maybe secret management with external tools, and then additional logging and monitoring enhancements.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump on this. To echo CSI, I will say if I can get on my soapbox, I'll get off quickly. But change block tracking will be huge in CSI, right? So there's a recent KEP that was included in Kubernetes enhancement proposal that's standardized essentially change block tracking in CSI. So I think that's something we'll probably see over the next year or two. OpenShift Vert is going to push that quite a bit. Beyond that, I think we're seeing a maturity in the market too. It's a lumpy market. But there's a lot of very mature organizations that are looking for very advanced features, advanced tuning, advanced performance. So I think we will continue to see growth there. And at the same time, I think we're seeing somewhat of I don't want to say consolidation, but it's almost more approachable. So see more solutions or tools. I think OpenShift's a great example that makes Kubernetes a little bit more digestible, right? As opposed to having to use kubectl the entire time, or whip out some JSON, having a nice user interface. I think we're seeing more and more evolution on that front.
Yeah, makes sense. Andy, you have anything to add?
Yeah, so kind of an extension of both of those is there's two stats that I like to throw out when I think about trends. One is from Gartner, 35% of applications will be running in containers by 2029 is their prediction. And that was before the rise of virtualization and the move of VMs to Kubernetes. At the same time, we did a survey earlier this year, and 58% of people we talked to said they were going to move VMs to Kubernetes, either running the VM on Kubernetes or containerizing onto Kubernetes those applications. And so the net is containers and Kubernetes and OpenShift are here to stay. And so as you're thinking about investing in storage and DR and backup and all the entire parts of the ecosystem, you have to think about it as this is the new future, and the future's now. We can't, and the investments have to reflect that, right? It's got to be reflective of, I need to build a architecture that can support applications that are running on Kubernetes, because that's where the industry is going, that's where it is today, and that's where it will be in the future.
Perfect. So last but definitely not least, Rodolfo, I know you had some insights when we spoke earlier today.
Yeah. So there is one new thing called AI, and I think AI is going to bring a lot of good stuff to data protection in OpenShift and Kubernetes. We have OpenShift AI, we have OpenShift Lightspeed from 4.15, I think. And I think I've used it in other platforms, and you can ask questions and with natural language, and you get responses that are great. And why not be able to do that with data protection and help you with the compliance and regulatory requirements and improve performance automatically? And I think there's a lot of good things coming in that realm.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So thank you so much to all our panelists. This was the last questions, but now it's a time for you. So we want to open up the floor. There should be microphones over there. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we're going to supply mic for you. And please take advantage of these awesome guys. They have a really deep knowledge.
Thanks. Hey. First, I just want to make a comment, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Rodolfo, about the backup and the recovery, right? Having a good backup or DR strategy is worthless if you don't test your recoveries.
Yeah.
So please, please, please test your recoveries. And to go to my question, it was more, I think, I was thinking a little bit more about the future of security, cybersecurity as it pertains to backup recovery and disaster recovery, and what things might we see coming as far as automating some of that, like what integrations with different security platforms might enact some event-driven type automation in that perspective.
Yeah, I'll jump on that a little bit. So yeah, good question, Michael, and also good point. Yes, please test your backups and disaster recovery. Very important there because Michael covered it. But yeah, in terms of what I think from a security perspective and looking forward, looking ahead in terms of integrations, I think some, I won't say low-hanging fruit, but with Kubernetes, we're obviously running container images, whether they're VMs or cloud-native apps. Container images have vulnerabilities. Right, so to be able to know, when you're going to go recover, and just identify, if you have a nice UI where you can identify and say, yes, this one's good, or this one's yellow, maybe this, new CVEs have popped up since, or red, like don't bring this back, this is a 0-day that's in this version. So I think we're going to see more integration among our security partners for hopefully our collective solutions. I also think, from a compliance perspective, I think we're going to see some advancements as well in terms of just canned recipes. So I know, Michael, you work quite a bit. Validated patterns, definitely check out that SIG later for those in the room. But I think seeing that more also for compliance, right? Just policy as code. I know there's a library of Kyverno policies you can leverage today, but just as more organizations adopt this and you share and contribute to the open source community, we'll see more and more kind of nuanced and niche capabilities there.
Perfect. Do we have any more questions?
Yes. Here. Related to CSI drivers and storage and backup solutions, what do you see related to the scalability, concerns related to CSI drivers, especially when we're talking about Loons and cloud-native applications? And what are your contribution to this roadmap related to CSI drivers with traditional storage interfaces?
Andy, you want to take that?
Sure, I'm going to steal a little bit. I'm staying up here to talk in 5 minutes. I'm going to make a pitch to stay because I'm going to answer this question in 5 minutes. But at a high level, the way I think about it at the core is, CSI is always going to be outside of the Kubernetes control plane. So whether it's for backup and DR, whether it's for persistent storage, whether it's for scaling, for automation, you're always going to be one step behind from an automation perspective, which could put you in a difficult position. From a backup and DR standpoint, really it's all about I want to be able to back up and restore and do sync and async DR at a container, granular, and an app-aware level, right? I want to be able to specifically say, I'm backing up this set of containers, I'm doing sync DR in this app, I'm doing a migration of this app. That's going to be challenging with CSI because, again, you've got multiple arrays, you're outside of the control plane. Container native storage is going to take that storage and data service into the control plane, onto the worker nodes, and just makes it and facilitates an easier way for you to solve the problem versus relying on the CSI driver.
Just one quick thing to add, and I know we're coming up on time, but Brenda, you brought this up as well, but I think for CSI from a performance standpoint, seeing things like Fiber Channel for specifically OpenShift vert workloads or block-based storage, I think we're going to continue to see enhancements there, and that's the hope, obviously, to support our VM workloads.